In the serene foothills of Montana, where dawn paints the sky in shades of amber and gold, a German shepherd's growl shatters the morning calm. This is no ordinary farm dog. Shadow was once the most decorated military canine in Afghanistan, with 147 confirmed enemy detections and 23 saved American lives. But the cartel closing in on Luna Martinez's farm doesn't know that. They see a 22-year-old girl and her pet, an easy target for their expansion into the valley. They're about to learn that some dogs never forget their training and some battles are lost before the first shot is fired. In the next 72 hours, the deadliest cartel in Mexico will discover why Shadow earned the nickname Ghost of Kandahar, and why threatening his new handler is the last mistake they'll ever make. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Luna Martinez's boots crunched on frost-covered grass as she made her early morning rounds. Shadow moved silently beside her, his black and tan coat blending with the dawn shadows. At 22, Luna carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd been running a farm since she was 18. Her father's passing had left her with 500 acres, a mountain of debt, and a legacy she refused to let die. "Check the fence line, boy," she whispered. Shadow's ears perked forward, and he moved with a precision that sometimes made Luna pause. No ordinary farm dog moved like that, with deliberate, tactical awareness of every sound, every movement, every change in the wind. The morning ritual was always the same. Check the fences, inspect the irrigation systems, make sure no predators had threatened the livestock overnight. But Shadow made it more than just chores. He made it a security patrol, though Luna didn't fully understand why until later. The Martinez farm sat in a strategic valley, though Luna didn't think about that either. To her, it was just home. The sweeping fields of wheat, the old red barn her grandfather had built, the creek that provided water even in the worst droughts. The property had been in her family for 3 generations, each Martinez adding something to make it better, stronger, more sustainable. Her father had been the last to improve it, installing solar panels and a state-of-the-art irrigation system just before the cancer took him. "Future-proof the farm, Mijita," he'd said from his hospital bed. "The land will take care of you if you take care of it." Shadow had come into her life 6 months after her father's death, when the bank was getting serious about foreclosure. She'd found him, or rather he'd found her, at a local shelter. The paperwork said he was a retired military working dog, but mentioned nothing about his service record or why such a valuable animal had ended up in a small Montana shelter. "Something's different about you," she'd said during their first meeting. Shadow had looked at her with eyes that seemed too intelligent, too assessing. He'd swept the room with his gaze before approaching her, and even then he'd positioned himself to keep the door in view. The shelter worker had seemed eager, too. Eager, Luna realized later, to approve the adoption. "He needs space to run," the woman had said. "A farm would be perfect." She'd handed over Shadow's basic medical records and some general care instructions, but nothing about his military background. That first night on the farm, Luna had discovered Shadow's true nature. A coyote had gotten into the chicken coop, and before Luna could even grab her rifle, Shadow had moved. Not with the excited barking of a farm dog, but with the silent, deadly efficiency of a trained operator. The coyote never stood a chance, and the chickens never lost another member to predators. Luna quickly learned to trust Shadow's instincts. When he grew alert, she paid attention. When he positioned himself between her and a stranger, she was polite but cautious. When he swept each room before letting her enter, she let him do his job. It was like having a guardian angel in fur, though she didn't yet understand just how accurate that description was. The farm began to prosper under their partnership. Shadow's presence deterred troublemakers, and his intelligence made him an invaluable working dog. He could herd cattle with military precision, detect equipment problems before they became serious, and somehow always knew when Luna was pushing herself too hard. "Just you and me against the world, boy," Luna would say. During their evening walks, Shadow would press against her leg, solid and reassuring, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. She'd grown to love his quirks, the way he cleared rooms, his insistence on specific patrol routes, how he positioned himself for optimal visibility when they had visitors. The locals called her the dog girl, some with affection, others with condescension. Few young women ran farms alone in this part of Montana, and fewer still did it successfully. But with Shadow at her side, Luna found herself caring less about their opinions. The farm was growing, the debts were shrinking, and she was proving that her father's faith in her hadn't been misplaced. That quiet life was about to change, though Luna didn't know it yet. As she finished her morning rounds, Shadow suddenly stiffened, his ears pricked forward, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Luna had learned to read his signals. This wasn't his warning for coyotes or wolves. This was something different, something that made the combat-trained muscles under his fur tense for action. "What is it, boy?" Luna scanned the horizon, seeing nothing unusual in the Montana dawn. But Shadow's posture told her everything she needed to know. Something was coming, something that would force both of them to reveal who they really were. Luna Martinez's boots crunched on frost-covered grass as she made her early morning rounds. Shadow moved silently beside her, his black and tan coat blending with the dawn shadows. At 22, Luna carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd been running a farm since she was 18. Her father's passing had left her with 500 acres, a mountain of debt, and a legacy she refused to let die. "Check the fence line, boy," she whispered. Shadow's ears perked forward, and he moved with a precision that sometimes made Luna pause. No ordinary farm dog moved like that, with deliberate, tactical awareness of every sound, every movement, every change in the wind. The morning ritual was always the same. Check the fences, inspect the irrigation systems, make sure no predators had threatened the livestock overnight. But Shadow made it more than just chores. He made it a security patrol, though Luna didn't fully understand why until later. The Martinez farm sat in a strategic valley, though Luna didn't think about that either. To her, it was just home. The sweeping fields of wheat, the old red barn her grandfather had built, the creek that provided water even in the worst droughts. The property had been in her family for 3 generations, each Martinez adding something to make it better, stronger, more sustainable. Her father had been the last to improve it, installing solar panels and a state-of-the-art irrigation system just before the cancer took him. "Future-proof the farm, Mijita," he'd said from his hospital bed. "The land will take care of you if you take care of it." Shadow had come into her life 6 months after her father's death, when the bank was getting serious about foreclosure. She'd found him, or rather he'd found her, at a local shelter. The paperwork said he was a retired military working dog, but mentioned nothing about his service record or why such a valuable animal had ended up in a small Montana shelter. "Something's different about you," she'd said during their first meeting. Shadow had looked at her with eyes that seemed too intelligent, too assessing. He'd swept the room with his gaze before approaching her, and even then he'd positioned himself to keep the door in view. The shelter worker had seemed eager, too. Eager, Luna realized later, to approve the adoption. "He needs space to run," the woman had said. "A farm would be perfect." She'd handed over Shadow's basic medical records and some general care instructions, but nothing about his military background. That first night on the farm, Luna had discovered Shadow's true nature. A coyote had gotten into the chicken coop, and before Luna could even grab her rifle, Shadow had moved. Not with the excited barking of a farm dog, but with the silent, deadly efficiency of a trained operator. The coyote never stood a chance, and the chickens never lost another member to predators. Luna quickly learned to trust Shadow's instincts. When he grew alert, she paid attention. When he positioned himself between her and a stranger, she was polite but cautious. When he swept each room before letting her enter, she let him do his job. It was like having a guardian angel in fur, though she didn't yet understand just how accurate that description was. The farm began to prosper under their partnership. Shadow's presence deterred troublemakers, and his intelligence made him an invaluable working dog. He could herd cattle with military precision, detect equipment problems before they became serious, and somehow always knew when Luna was pushing herself too hard. "Just you and me against the world, boy," Luna would say. During their evening walks, Shadow would press against her leg, solid and reassuring, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. She'd grown to love his quirks, the way he cleared rooms, his insistence on specific patrol routes, how he positioned himself for optimal visibility when they had visitors. The locals called her the dog girl, some with affection, others with condescension. Few young women ran farms alone in this part of Montana, and fewer still did it successfully. But with Shadow at her side, Luna found herself caring less about their opinions. The farm was growing, the debts were shrinking, and she was proving that her father's faith in her hadn't been misplaced. That quiet life was about to change, though Luna didn't know it yet. As she finished her morning rounds, Shadow suddenly stiffened. His ears pricked forward, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Luna had learned to read his signals. This wasn't his warning for coyotes or wolves. This was something different, something that made the combat-trained muscles under his fur tense for action. "What is it, boy?" Luna scanned the horizon, seeing nothing unusual in the Montana dawn. But Shadow's posture told her everything she needed to know. Something was coming, something that would force both of them to reveal who they really were. The wind carried the scent of autumn and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance an engine growled. Shadow's growl deepened in response, and Luna felt the first stirring of real concern. Her quiet life with her extraordinary dog was about to become anything but quiet. Staff Sergeant Mike Collins watched the security footage from his desk at Fort Bragg, his coffee growing cold. The timestamp showed 3 a.m. at a small Montana shelter, and what he saw made his jaw clench. Shadow, officially designated MWD, military, working dog. Echo 7 was performing a perfect perimeter sweep of his kennel. Even after retirement, the dog's training hadn't faded. "He's not supposed to be there," Collins muttered, reaching for his phone. The retirement paperwork clearly stated Echo 7 was meant for a specific program, not a random shelter in Montana. Someone had diverted one of the most decorated military dogs in recent history, and Collins needed to know why. But when he saw the young woman who adopted Shadow, something clicked. Luna Martinez, daughter of former Army Ranger Carlos Martinez. Maybe not so random after all. Luna didn't know she was being watched that morning, but Shadow did. As they walked the farm's perimeter, his tactical training registered the surveillance. 2 men in a black SUV parked just at the edge of his enhanced scent range. They were using cameras with long lenses, speaking Spanish in hushed tones, and carrying weapons. Shadow kept himself between their position and Luna, his body language casual, but his senses on high alert. The day Shadow had chosen Luna at the shelter, he'd recognized something in her, the same steady calm he'd sensed in his handlers overseas. The shelter staff had seemed unusually insistent that Luna take him, especially after seeing her last name on the paperwork. Shadow had noted their quick phone calls, the whispered conversations. His training had taught him to observe human behavior, to detect patterns and anomalies. That first night on the farm, he'd done what came naturally, a full tactical assessment of the property. The farmhouse had good lines of sight, defensible positions, and multiple exit routes. The barn provided excellent elevated observation points. The creek offered both a water source and a potential escape route. His military mind had mapped it, all filing away information that would prove crucial in the days to come. Luna's father had known what he was doing when he designed the farm's security. The cameras were well hidden, the motion sensors disguised as agricultural equipment, and the reinforced safe room in the basement looked like a normal storm cellar. Shadow had found them all within hours, recognizing the work of someone with tactical training. Your dad was more than just a ranger, the local sheriff had told Luna at the funeral. He helped a lot of people in ways that never made the official records. Luna had nodded, not really understanding then. Shadow understood perfectly. He'd worked with men like Carlos Martinez in Afghanistan, the ones who operated in the shadows, protecting others without recognition. Now, 2 years later, Shadow watched Luna check the irrigation systems, his mind processing multiple threats and scenarios. The men in the SUV weren't the first to watch the farm. Over the past month, he'd detected various observers, different vehicles, different men, but similar tactical patterns. They were building surveillance, preparing for something. Luna had grown into her role as a farmer, but Shadow saw the warrior underneath. The way she moved with awareness of her surroundings, how she instinctively noted escape routes, her habit of keeping her back to walls, all unconscious lessons from a father who'd wanted his daughter to survive. A sudden wind shift brought new scents, gun oil, cigarettes, and the distinct smell of multiple humans trying to move quietly through the wheat field. Shadow's muscles tensed, but he maintained his casual demeanor. His military training had taught him the value of letting enemies think they had the advantage. Luna noticed his subtle shift. "What's wrong, boy?" she whispered, her hand automatically moving to the rifle slung across her back. Another of her father's lessons. Never work the far fields unarmed. Shadow pressed against her leg, using his body to subtly guide her toward the barn. Inside, he knew, was a cache of equipment that Carlos Martinez had left for his daughter. Shadow had found it during his first week on the farm. Weapons, communications gear, and a sealed letter addressed to Luna with instructions to open it only in an emergency. That emergency, Shadow sensed, was approaching faster than anyone expected. The men watching them weren't simple criminals. Their movements, equipment, and tactics spoke of military training. They were professionals, methodical in their surveillance, patient in their planning. What they didn't know was that they were watching a dog who had spent 4 years in Special Operations Command, with over 100 combat missions in the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan. A dog trained not just to detect threats, but to respond to them with lethal precision. A dog who had chosen this farm, this girl, for reasons that went beyond simple adoption. As Luna and Shadow reached the barn, the radio hidden inside crackled to life. A voice Shadow recognized spoke urgent words in a coded sequence he remembered from his military days. Staff Sergeant Collins was trying to warn them, but he was too late. The cartel had already set their plan in motion, and the quiet Montana Valley was about to become a battlefield. But that's exactly what Shadow had been trained for. His ears picked up the sound of more vehicles approaching, and his nose caught the scent of more armed men moving into position. Luna felt the change in her dog's demeanor. To her eyes, he was still the loyal companion who had helped her save the farm. She didn't yet know that she had been chosen to be protected by one of the most lethal military assets ever to serve in special operations. As the morning sun climbed higher, Shadow made his decision. It was time for Luna to read her father's letter. Time for her to understand why a military working dog had ended up at her shelter. Time for her to learn why her father had spent his last days upgrading the farm's security. The cartel was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating their targets. They saw a young woman and her German shepherd. What they were actually facing was a highly trained military operator with 4 years of combat experience and a kill count that would make hardened soldiers pause. Shadow moved toward the hidden cache, nudging Luna's hand. The time for hiding. What he really was had ended. Now it was time to show why he had earned his other name in Afghanistan, the Ghost of Kandahar. The black SUVs appeared just before noon, their polished surfaces reflecting the Montana sun. 3 vehicles moving with purposeful precision up the dirt road toward Luna's farmhouse. Shadow watched their approach from the barn's shadow, his posture relaxed, but his muscles coiled for action. These were the men he'd been scenting all morning, 8 distinct human signatures, all armed, all carrying themselves with military bearing. Luna stood on her porch, one hand resting casually on Shadow's head, the other near the shotgun propped against the wall. Her father's letter lay opened on the kitchen table behind her, its contents having turned her world upside down just 30 minutes earlier. "Your farm sits on a crucial smuggling corridor," Carlos had written. "I bought this land knowing what it would mean, knowing they would come eventually. Shadow isn't just a dog, he's your guardian, hand-picked from the Special Operations K9 unit. Trust him, he'll know what to do when the time comes." The lead SUV stopped at her gate, and Luna counted 4 men emerging. Expensive suits? Wrong. Shoes for farm country, subtle bulges under their jackets. The leader approached with a practiced smile, but Shadow's low growl told Luna everything she needed to know. "Miss Martinez," the man called out, his accent placing him somewhere in northern Mexico. "I'm Miguel Ramirez. We have a business proposition to discuss." Shadow's ears twitched at the name. In his military days, he'd been briefed on high-value cartel targets. Ramirez was on that list. Former Mexican Special Forces, now running operations for the Sinaloa cartel's northern expansion. "Not interested in selling," Luna replied firmly, remembering her father's warnings. "Farms not for sale at any price." Ramirez's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "Perhaps we should discuss this inside. The sun is quite harsh." He took a step toward the porch steps, and Shadow's growl deepened. The cartel lieutenant froze, his trained eye finally registering something about the dog's stance. This wasn't a normal farm dog's protective behavior. This was different, tactical, measured, professional. "Beautiful animal," Ramirez said carefully. "German shepherd. He seems well-trained." "He is," Luna answered simply. She'd read her father's letter, understood now what Shadow really was. Her hand moved from his head to the special collar she'd found in the cache, the one with military-grade communications gear built in. 2 more men approached from the second SUV, spreading out in a standard tactical formation. Shadow noted their positions, their weapon locations, the way they established overlapping fields of fire. They were good, but he was better. "Miss Martinez," Ramirez continued, "you must understand. This valley is changing. Progress comes whether we want it or not. We're prepared to offer 3 times your farm's market value." Luna thought of her father's letter, of the maps showing how her farm controlled access to 3 different valleys. "The land's not for sale," she repeated. "Not at any price." Ramirez's facade cracked slightly. "Young women shouldn't have to work so hard," he said, his tone carrying a subtle threat. "Accidents happen on farms. Equipment malfunctions. Fires start. It would be a shame if..." Shadow moved. Not attacking, not yet, but shifting his position with such fluid precision that every cartel member's hand instinctively moved toward their weapons. In that moment, Ramirez saw it, the way the dog moved, the way he positioned himself. His eyes widened in recognition. "Military dog," he muttered in Spanish to his men. "Special operations training. Watch him." "Last chance, Miss Martinez," Ramirez said louder. $10 million, cash. More money than this farm will make in 50 years. Luna felt Shadow's muscles tense under her hand. She saw the other men moving to surround her porch, saw the calculated menace in their postures, but she also saw something else. Fear. Not of her, but of the dog who watched them with cold, tactical intelligence. "Get off my property," Luna said quietly. "Don't come back." Ramirez stepped forward, his patience visibly ending. "Perhaps we're approaching this wrong. Your father understood how things worked. He knew when to cooperate. You should—" Shadow launched himself from the porch, not attacking, but executing a perfect tactical maneuver that placed him between Luna and the cartel members, his teeth bared. In silent warning, the movement was so fast, so professional, that two of Ramirez's men stumbled backward. "Delta Force K9, one of them whispered. "Like the ones in Kandahar." Ramirez's face went cold. The game had changed. What should have been a simple intimidation of a young farmer had just revealed itself as something far more complicated. He'd seen dogs like this before, during his Special Forces days. Dogs that could clear buildings, disable armed men, detect explosives, and execute combat maneuvers with their handlers. 3 days, Ramirez said, backing toward his vehicle. 3 days to reconsider. After that, he left the threat unfinished. As the SUVs pulled away, Luna knelt beside Shadow, her hands shaking slightly. "Good boy," she whispered. "But they'll be back, won't they?" Shadow's posture remained alert, his eyes tracking the vehicles until they disappeared. He'd seen the weapons in the third SUV, military-grade hardware, not normal cartel equipment. They were preparing for war. Luna walked back into the house, picking up her father's letter again. Below the main text was a series of numbers, coordinates. She plugged them into her phone, finding they led to an abandoned silver mine on her property. "More surprises, Dad?" she asked the empty room. Shadow padded over, pressing against her. Leg. He knew what was in that mine. He'd found the entrance during his first week on the farm. Inside was everything they'd need for what was coming. Luna's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Shadow's handler here. Stay put. Help is coming. Trust the dog." Outside, the Montana sun continued its arc across the sky, unaware that the quiet valley was about to become a battleground. The cartel had just made their first move, but they had no idea what they were really fighting. Shadow settled into his guard position by the window, his military training fully activated now. The time for pretending to be just a farm dog was over. Now he had to be what he truly was, a highly trained combat operator with a mission to protect. Dawn broke over the Martinez farm, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. But Shadow wasn't watching the sunrise. His attention was fixed on the tree line, where his enhanced senses had detected movement. 3 men, moving with military precision through the morning mist. Cartel scouts doing their pre-operation reconnaissance. Luna checked the security feeds on her tablet, a gift from her father she'd found in the silver mine cache. The cameras showed nothing yet, but Shadow's behavior told her everything she needed to know. His ears were forward, his body tense but controlled. This wasn't his normal alert posture. This was combat ready. "What do you see, boy?" she whispered, trusting his military training more than the technology. Shadow's head turned slightly toward the north field, where the wheat grew tall enough to conceal approaching threats. Luna remembered her father's letter. Shadow can detect threats up to a mile away. His hearing is tuned to specific frequencies, gun mechanisms, radio communications, tactical movement patterns. The sound of distant vehicles drew her attention. Not the usual farm trucks or local traffic. These engines had a different pitch. Military-grade SUVs, if her father's training notes about Shadow were correct. The cartel was done playing games. Shadow suddenly stiffened, his nose working the air. Gun oil, cordite, tactical gear. His training catalogued the threats automatically. At least 6 armed men, carrying AR-15s and body armor, moving in a standard sweep formation. Their technique was professional, but Shadow had trained against better. Luna's phone buzzed. Another text from Shadow's handler. Motion sensors. Picked up multiple tangos. Shadow knows the drill. Grey cabinet in mine, second shelf. Code is his deployment date. She'd already found it. A specialized tactical vest for Shadow, designed for military K9 operators. The reinforced material could stop small arms fire, and the integrated communication system would let him receive commands from up to a mile away. Luna had spent the night studying the military manual, learning the hand signals and verbal commands that Shadow had been trained to recognize. A glint of metal in the tree line caught her attention. Sniper scope. Shadow was already moving, herding. Luna away from the window with the same precision he used to move cattle. They'd practiced this drill 6 times since yesterday, and Luna had learned to trust his judgment. As if to prove the point, a bullet cracked through the space where she'd been standing. "Good boy," she whispered, her heart pounding. Shadow's ears twitched at a sound Luna couldn't hear, and he nudged her toward the kitchen. 3 seconds later, her phone buzzed with an alert from the perimeter sensors. Movement at the south fence. The cartel was probing their defenses, testing their response patterns. Luna activated the tablet's thermal imaging, another piece of military hardware from her father's cache. 8 heat signatures moving through the wheat field, 2 more in elevated positions in the trees. Professional formation. Just like Shadow's manual had described, Shadow's training kicked in fully. He moved to the kitchen's blind spot, positioning himself to cover both entrances. His ears tracked multiple threats, building a tactical picture that would have impressed his military handlers. The cartel team was good, ex-military good, but they were about to learn why Shadow had been chosen for special operations. A new sound cut through the morning. Helicopters. Not the usual crop dusters or medical flights. These were running dark, flying low to avoid radar. The cartel was bringing in their serious players. Luna's phone buzzed again. "Backup is 30 minutes out. Shadow knows what to do. Trust him." As if understanding the message, Shadow moved to the cabinet where Luna had stored his tactical gear. His eyes locked with hers, conveying one clear message. It was time to show these cartel soldiers why threatening a farm protected by a Delta Force K9 was a serious mistake. Luna's hands shook slightly as she fitted Shadow's tactical vest, checking the ceramic plates and communications gear. The dog stood perfectly still, professional to the core, as she adjusted the straps. This wasn't her farm companion anymore. This was Echo 7, veteran of 100 combat missions, about to go back to work. The tablet showed more heat signatures. Approaching. The cartel was establishing a perimeter. They thought they were setting up a textbook military operation. Instead, they were walking into a trap. Shadow had spent the night placing motion sensors and tripwires, using his combat experience to turn the farm into a tactical nightmare for any attacking force. A burst of static came through Shadow's communications gear, a coded sequence that made his ears prick forward. Luna recognized it from the manual. Long-range reconnaissance warning. The cartel wasn't just probing anymore, they were preparing for a full assault. Shadow's muscles tensed as he processed multiple threat indicators. Bootsteps in the grain storage area, radio clicks from the barn, the metallic sound of weapons being readied. His military training translated it all into actionable intelligence, and his body language told Luna everything she needed to know. "Show me," she whispered, clipping his tactical leash into place. Shadow led her to the reinforced basement door, just as the first explosion lit up the morning sky. The cartel had made their first move, but Shadow was already 3 moves ahead. They thought they were hunting a young woman and her pet. They were about to learn they were up against something far more dangerous, a highly trained military operator, with 4 combat tours and a perfect record of protecting his handlers. Shadow's ears swiveled, tracking multiple threats as Luna activated his communication system. It was time to remind these cartel soldiers why some dogs earn their reputation. In combat, not kennels. The Silvermine's heavy steel door opened with a hydraulic hiss, revealing what Luna's father had spent years preparing. Not just a cache, a full military-grade command center. Tactical gear lined the walls, communications equipment hummed quietly, and multiple screens showed feeds from cameras hidden across the property. "This is what you've been trying to show me, isn't it?" Luna asked Shadow, who moved through the space with familiar precision. He'd known about this place all along, had probably been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. The storage units were marked with military precision, CQB equipment, long-range communications, medical, tactical gear. Luna's hands trembled as she opened them, finding everything from night vision goggles to encrypted radios. Her father had prepared for exactly this scenario. Shadow's ears suddenly pricked forward, and he moved to the communications console. Seconds later, it crackled to life. Echo 7, this is Handler Actual. Authentication code Sierra Delta 94. Acknowledge. Shadow barked once, a sharp, professional sound. "Luna, if you're receiving this, your father's security protocols have been activated. Satellite shows multiple hostile forces converging on your position. Shadow has been trained for this exact scenario. He knows every piece of equipment in that bunker. Let him guide you." Luna watched in amazement as Shadow moved to a specific cabinet, pawing at the handle. Inside, she found a manual titled Emergency Response Protocols, Martinez Farm. Her father's handwriting filled the margins, with notes about defensive positions, escape routes, and tactical advantages of the property. "They're using ex-military contractors," the radio continued. "Professional teams with combat experience, but Shadow has something they don't. He knows every inch of that farm, and he's been preparing for this since the day he chose you at the shelter." As if to demonstrate, Shadow led Luna to a tactical map of the property. Red markers showed defensive positions, blue indicated safe routes, and yellow highlighted natural advantages they could use. The dog's military training was fully evident now. This wasn't just a pet showing his owner around. This was a combat veteran briefing his new handler. Outside, the cartel forces were establishing their positions. Luna watched their heat signatures. On the thermal imaging displays, they were good, maintaining proper spacing, establishing clear fields of fire, setting up command and control positions. But they didn't know what they were really walking into. Shadow nudged Luna's hand, directing her attention to a specific section of the manual. K9 Tactical Commands and Responses. The page showed detailed instructions for working with a military dog in combat situations. Luna's throat tightened as she realized her father had been preparing her for this moment all along. "Your dad wasn't just a ranger," the radio crackled again. "He was part of a special unit that worked with military dogs like Shadow. He knew they'd come for the farm eventually. That's why he made sure Shadow found you." Luna checked her watch. 20 minutes until the handler's promised backup would arrive. They needed to hold out, but more importantly, they needed to make the cartel think twice about what they were walking into. Shadow's posture changed suddenly, alert but not alarmed. He led Luna to another cabinet, which contained what looked like standard farming equipment. But these weren't normal tools. Each piece had been modified for tactical purposes. Irrigation sprayers that could deploy smoke screens, fertilizer spreaders that could lay down caltrops. Farm equipment transformed into defensive weapons. "Remember," the radio advised, "Shadow isn't just trained for combat. He's a psychological warfare asset. Let them see enough to make them hesitate, to make them wonder what else they're facing." Luna understood. She fitted Shadow with his full tactical gear, the vest with its ceramic plates, the specialized communications equipment, the infrared markers that would identify him to friendly forces. He stood perfectly still during the process, every inch The professional operator. Watching the thermal feeds, Luna saw the cartel forces pause as their scouts reported back. They'd expected to find a young woman and her pet. Instead, their recon showed military-grade defenses, professional tactical preparations, and a dog that moved like a special forces operator. "They're calling in more men," the radio reported. "But they're also getting nervous. Shadow's reputation in Afghanistan was significant. Some of their ex-military contractors are starting to ask questions about what they're really up against." Shadow led Luna through the bunker's equipment methodically, showing her exactly what they'd need. His selection was precise. Flashbangs that would disorient but not harm, smoke generators that would confuse thermal imaging, specialized ammunition that would disable vehicles without risking lethal force. Handler actual to Echo 7. Satellite shows multiple assault teams forming up. Time to show them why they called you the Ghost of Kandahar. Shadow's posture shifted subtly, from alert to combat ready. Luna saw it now, the difference between her farm dog and the military operator he truly was. His muscles coiled with professional precision, his eyes constantly scanning, his every movement calculated for tactical advantage. A new sound cut through. The morning, more helicopters approaching, but Shadow's reaction was different this time. His ears pricked forward in recognition, and the radio confirmed what he already knew. "Cavalry's arriving early, Luna. Just hold tight. Shadow knows what to do next, and remember, they think they're hunting you. Let them keep thinking that right up until they realize who's really hunting who." Luna looked at her dog, now fully equipped for combat, and saw him in a completely new light. The cartel thought they were dealing with a simple farm girl and her pet. They were about to learn that some dogs are born for the farm, but others are bred for battle. Shadow moved to the bunker's entrance, his body language speaking clearly. It was time to remind these cartel soldiers why some enemies should be left alone. Luna checked her tactical gear one last time, then whispered the command Shadow had been waiting for. "Let's show them what you can really do, boy." The first cartel team discovered Shadow's true capabilities in the North Wheatfield. They were moving in standard tactical formation, weapons ready, confident in their approach. The morning mist provided perfect cover, or so they thought. Shadow tracked them through the wheat, his military training translating every sound, scent, and movement into tactical data. 4 men, ex-military by their movement patterns, carrying modified M4 carbines. Their spacing was professional, their communications disciplined, but they'd made one critical mistake. They were hunting what they thought was a farm dog. "Contact north," Luna whispered into her radio from her position in the barn's observation post. "Shadow's got them." The dog moved like a ghost through the wheat, his dark fur and tactical vest making him nearly invisible in the pre-dawn light. The cartel team never saw him coming. One moment they were advancing in formation, the next their point man was on the ground, his weapon stripped away with a precision disarm technique that only special operations K9s were taught. "What the hell?" the team leader hissed in Spanish. "That's not normal dog behavior." The second man raised his weapon, but Shadow was already gone, melting into the wheat. His military training had taught him the value of psychological warfare. Don't just defeat enemies, make them question everything they thought they knew. Luna watched through her thermal scope as Shadow systematically dismantled the cartel team's cohesion. A blur of motion here, a growl there, always staying just out of clear sight. The tactical manual had called it Ghost Dog Protocol, using fear and uncertainty as weapons. "Be advised," the radio crackled with Handler Actual's voice. "Satellite shows 3 more teams moving in." Shadows authorized. "For full tactical response." As if hearing the command, Shadow shifted from harassment to direct action. He emerged from the wheat like a shadow coming to life, targeting the team's radio operator first, just as he'd been trained in Afghanistan. No barking, no wasted movement, just the silent efficiency that had made him legendary among special operations units. The radio operator went down in a controlled takedown, his equipment disabled with surgical precision. The team leader got off 2 shots, but Shadow was already moving, executing the evasion patterns drilled into him through countless combat missions. "Jesus Christ," one of the cartel soldiers whispered, recognizing the dog's movements. "This is a Delta Force K9, like the ones in Kandahar." Luna's voice came over their captured radio. "Last chance to withdraw. Next time he won't be so gentle." The cartel team retreated in disarray, but Shadow wasn't finished. He moved to intercept their escape route, herding them exactly where he wanted them, into the open field where Luna had clear lines of sight. One by one, she disabled their weapons with precise shots, just as Shadow had trained her over the past day. "Target suppressed," Luna reported, using the military terminology she'd learned from her father's manuals. Shadow's moving to Sector 2. The dog was already in motion, his sensors detecting the second cartel team approaching from the east. This group was moving more cautiously, having heard the first team's panicked radio calls. But caution wouldn't save them from what they were about to face. Shadow took up position behind the grain silo, his tactical vest's communication system, feeding him real-time updates from Luna's observation post. The second team was better equipped, body armor, night vision gear, even flashbangs. They'd come prepared for serious resistance. "Multiple targets, east perimeter," Luna called out. "They're carrying heavy weapons, Shadow. Be careful." The dog's response was pure special operations. He triggered the first of the defensive measures he'd helped set up. Motion sensors that activated the farm's irrigation sprinklers, creating an instant smoke screen. The cartel team's night vision gear became a liability, the sudden change in light conditions disorienting them. Shadow moved through the chaos like a wraith, 4 years of combat experience guiding every action. He didn't attack randomly. Each move was calculated professional, designed to create maximum psychological impact with minimum force. "What kind of dog is this?" the team's leader shouted as Shadow systematically disabled their tactical advantages. Night vision goggles torn, away with precision strikes, radio equipment rendered useless, weapons knocked from trained hands by a creature that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Luna's voice came over their remaining radio. "You're not dealing with a dog. You're dealing with Echo 7, Special Operations Command. Look him up, if you live long enough." The second team broke formation, making a fatal mistake. They separated. Shadow had trained for this, had run countless combat scenarios just like it. One by one, he picked them off, using non-lethal takedown techniques that would have made his military handlers proud. "Sir," one of the surviving team members reported back to Cartel Command, "this isn't just some farm protection. The dog, he's military trained, special operations. We've lost 6 men and he hasn't even drawn blood yet. He's just playing with us." Shadow regrouped with Luna at their predetermined rally point, his movement still combat fluid despite the intense activity. His tactical vest showed no damage. None of the cartel's professional soldiers had managed to land a single hit. "Good boy," Luna whispered, checking his equipment. Shadow's posture remained alert, his senses already tracking the third team's approach. But now they could hear uncertainty in the cartel's radio communications. What had started as a simple intimidation operation had turned into something else entirely. "Handler actual to Echo 7, the radio crackled. "Satellite shows enemy forces regrouping. They're calling in their heavy weapons team. Time to show them why they called you the Ghost." Shadow's ears pricked forward at the command phrase. The cartel had come expecting to find a young woman and her pet. Instead, they'd found something their military training hadn't prepared them for. A 4-legged special operations veteran who had turned the entire farm into his personal hunting ground. Luna checked her tactical display as more cartel forces approached, but now she wasn't worried. Let them come in force. They still didn't understand what they were really facing. Shadow wasn't just defending the farm, he was doing what he'd been trained for, what he'd been born for. He was showing them why some dogs earn their reputations not in kennels, but in combat. Miguel Ramirez stared at the tactical display in his command vehicle, his face dark with rage and disbelief. 3 professional teams neutralized, 6 men in the hospital, and all their sophisticated equipment disabled or destroyed. Not by an army, not by law enforcement, but by a single German shepherd. "Show me again," he commanded, and his intelligence officer replayed the thermal footage. On the screen, Shadow moved like liquid shadow through their formations, his actions. Precise, calculated, professional. This wasn't a dog fighting on instinct. These were trained military tactics executed with lethal precision. "We found his service record, sir," the intelligence officer reported, passing over a heavily redacted document. Echo 7, Special Operations Command, 4 tours in Afghanistan, over 100 successful combat missions. They called him the Ghost of Kandahar. Ramirez's hand tightened on the document. He remembered stories from his days in Mexican Special Forces about a particular American military dog, a canine operator who could disable entire enemy compounds without killing anyone, who could detect ambushes before they were sprung, who seemed to understand complex tactical situations better than most human soldiers. "Sir," his radio crackled, "4th team in position. We have the farm surrounded." But even as the words came through, alarms blared in the command vehicle. On the tactical display, Shadow was already moving to counter their new positions. He wasn't reacting to their deployment. He was anticipating it, using their own tactical doctrine against them. Inside the farmhouse, Luna watched through her command tablet as Shadow executed a perfect counter-surveillance pattern. Her father's. Manual had detailed Shadow's capabilities, but seeing them in action was something else entirely. The dog moved with such fluid precision that the cartel's trained operators couldn't track him. "Multiple targets clustering by the grain silo," Luna reported through Shadow's tactical communications system. "They're setting up their heavy weapons." Shadow processed the information instantly, his military training kicking in. The cartel was following standard tactical doctrine: establish a base of fire, then move assault teams under its cover. But they didn't know he had trained specifically to counter these tactics in Afghanistan. The cartel's heavy weapons team never saw what hit them. One moment they were setting up their position, the next, Shadow had ghosted through their security and disabled their belt-fed machine gun with precise bites to its operating mechanism. 4 years of combat experience had taught him exactly where to strike, to render weapons useless without harming the operators. "It's not possible," one of the team leaders radioed back to Ramirez. "The dog understands tactical warfare. He's not just attacking, he's systematically dismantling our entire operation." Ramirez watched as Shadow continued his methodical disruption of their assault. The dog wasn't just reacting anymore, he was controlling the battlefield, herding cartel forces into prepared kill zones, where Luna could easily disable their vehicles with precise shots. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're intercepting a military transmission. You need to hear this." The radio crackled. "Echo 7, this is Handler Actual, Phase 2 authorized. Show them why they fear the dark." Shadow's response was immediate and devastating. He triggered a series of pre-planned defenses: irrigation systems creating smoke screens, hidden speakers broadcasting tactical confusion, motion sensors activating carefully placed lights that destroyed the cartel team's night vision. "He's not just a dog," Ramirez realized aloud. "He's a complete tactical warfare system." Luna watched from her command post as Shadow systematically isolated and neutralized cartel teams using textbook special operations tactics. The manual had explained his capabilities, but this was beyond anything she'd imagined. Every move was calculated, every action part of a larger strategy. "Target their command and control," Luna ordered, using the command phrases she'd memorized. Shadow acknowledged with a single bark, already moving to execute the mission. Ramirez felt the change in the battle's momentum. His forces were professional soldiers, trained in modern combat tactics, but they were facing something their training hadn't prepared them for: a four-legged special operations veteran who had turned the entire farm into an integrated defense system. "Pull back," he ordered finally, watching another team retreat in disarray. "Regroup and—" His words cut off as Shadow materialized out of the darkness beside his command vehicle. The dog's tactical vest gleamed with military precision, his posture communicating one clear message. This was his territory, and they were no longer welcome in it. "Holy Mother of God," Ramirez's driver whispered, recognizing the vest's unit patches. "That's a Delta Force K9, the ghost dog from Kandahar." Luna's voice came through their captured radio. "Next time, do your reconnaissance better. Shadow doesn't just protect this farm. He owns it." As if to emphasize her words, Shadow executed a perfect tactical withdrawal, disappearing into the darkness as silently as he'd appeared. He left behind not just a defeated cartel assault force, but a growing legend. The story would spread through criminal circles, the farm protected by something more than fences and guns. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "satellite shows. Multiple military helicopters inbound. We need to withdraw." Ramirez stared at the thermal feed, watching Shadow's heat signature move with impossible precision through his defensive positions. The cartel lieutenant had fought against armies, police forces, rival gangs. But this was different. They weren't fighting a dog. They were fighting a highly trained military operator who just happened to have 4 legs. "Withdraw all forces," he ordered finally, "and get me everything you can find about Echo 7's combat record. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." But as his forces pulled back in disarray, Ramirez already knew. They had walked into this thinking they were dealing with a simple farm dog. Instead, they'd awakened something far more dangerous. A special operations veteran who had spent years learning how to dismantle exactly the kind of tactical operation they'd tried to mount. Shadow regrouped with Luna at their command post, his posture still combat-ready despite the enemy's retreat. This wasn't over, they both knew that. The cartel would be back, better prepared next time. But now they understood what they were really facing. They had come hunting a dog. Instead, they'd found a ghost. The military helicopter touched down in Luna's south field just before sunset, its black hull absorbing the dying light. Shadow's posture changed instantly, not combat-ready, but a different kind of alert. Recognition. As the side door slid open, Luna understood why. Staff Sergeant Mike Collins stepped onto Montana soil, and Shadow's entire demeanor transformed. The dog moved with barely contained energy, maintaining his tactical discipline, but clearly wanting to greet his former handler. Collins knelt, removing his tactical gloves, and gave a hand signal Luna had never seen before. Shadow exploded into motion, covering the distance in seconds, but his greeting wasn't that of a normal dog. Instead, he executed what Luna recognized as a tactical reunion protocol, checking Collins for injuries or threats before allowing himself a moment of genuine joy. "Good to see you too, boy," Collins said quietly, checking Shadow's tactical vest with professional precision. "You've kept in shape." He looked up at Luna, his face grave. "We need to talk. Your father's secret bunker still operational?" Luna's eyes widened. "How do you—" "Because I helped him build it," Collins cut her off. "Carlos and I served together before I became Shadow's handler. This farm, it's more important than you know." Inside the command bunker, Collins spread satellite photos across the tactical table, Shadow took up his observation position, watching both entrances while staying within earshot. Your farm sits at the intersection of three major cartel smuggling routes, Collins explained, pointing to marked paths on the map. But that's not why they want it. This land holds something far more valuable. He pulled out another map. This one old, marked with hand-drawn symbols Luna didn't recognize. Your grandfather wasn't just a farmer. He was part of a classified military intelligence operation in the 1960s. They used this valley to hide something. Something the cartels have spent decades trying to find. Luna's hands trembled as she unfolded her father's letter again. Certain phrases suddenly made new sense. The land holds secrets worth dying for, and Shadow was chosen specifically for this farm. What did they hide here? She asked. Collins checked his tactical watch before answering. During the Cold War, this valley served as a backup command and control center for the entire Western defense network. Underground bunkers, communications arrays, enough equipment to coordinate military operations across half the country. Most of it was decommissioned, but your grandfather made sure certain systems stayed operational. Shadow's ears suddenly pricked. Forward. Moments later, Luna's tactical display lit up with multiple warnings. The cartel was back, and this time they'd brought something new. Thermal signatures match Mexican military hardware, Collins said, studying the feeds. They're not just coming for the farm anymore. They've figured out what's really here. Luna's mind raced. That's why Dad installed all the security, why he made sure Shadow would find me. This isn't just about protecting a farm. It's about protecting a strategic military asset, Collins finished. Shadow wasn't randomly assigned to retirement. He was specifically chosen for this mission. His experience in Afghanistan, his training. In protecting sensitive installations, he was the perfect guardian for this place. As if to confirm this, Shadow moved to a section of wall Luna had never paid attention to before. Collins nodded and pressed a hidden panel. The wall slid away, revealing a state-of-the-art military command center that made the bunker's other equipment look obsolete. Still operational, Collins said with grim satisfaction. Your father maintained it all these years, right under everyone's nose. If the cartels get control of this facility, they'd have access to classified military frequencies, old but still active command protocols, and underground routes that could move armies undetected across state lines. Luna stared at the screens, coming to life, showing tactical data she barely understood. How many people know about this? Not enough, Collins replied, checking his weapon. That's why I'm here. Shadow's been holding the line, but what's coming next? It's going to take all of us. Outside, the sound of helicopter rotors grew closer. The tactical display showed more heat signatures than Luna had ever seen. The cartel was coming in force. They'll hit us with everything now, Collins warned. No more probing attacks, no more testing defenses. They know what they're really fighting for. Shadow moved to Luna's side, his posture shifting from alert to combat ready. He'd been protecting more than just a farm all along. He'd been guarding one of the most sensitive military installations in the western United States. That's why the shelter pushed so hard for me to adopt him, Luna realized. Why Dad made sure I'd be ready. This whole time, you've been part of something bigger, Collins confirmed. Shadow wasn't just assigned here. He volunteered. After 4 combat tours, he chose this as his final mission, protecting this facility and you. Luna's hand found Shadow's tactical vest, feeling the strength in his combat-hardened muscles. He wasn't just her protector or a military asset. He was a guardian chosen for this specific purpose, combining his tactical training with a deeper mission. The tactical display erupted with new warnings. The cartel's main force was approaching, led by vehicles Luna had never seen before. Those are military-grade assault vehicles, Collins said grimly. They're done playing games. Now they're coming to take what they think is hidden here. Shadows. Growl took on a new meaning. Not just protective, but understanding. He'd known all along what he was really guarding. Every patrol, every perimeter check had been about more than just farm security. "So what do we do?" Luna asked, watching the enemy forces approach. Collins checked his tactical gear, then gave Shadow a hand signal that made the dog's posture shift to full combat mode. "We show them why some secrets are better left buried, and why Shadow earned his reputation as more than just a military dog." The command center's screens filled with tactical data as the cartel's forces moved into position. They thought they were about to seize a valuable military asset. Instead, they were about to learn why some installations are protected by more than just walls and weapons. They were about to learn why Shadow had been chosen as the guardian of secrets that could change the course of a war. Miguel Ramirez stood in the mobile command center, surrounded by screens showing live satellite feeds of the Martinez farm. But his attention was fixed on the man who had just arrived, Colonel Viktor Petrov, former Russian Spetsnaz commander, now the cartel's chief of special operations. "So," Petrov said, his accent thick with disdain, "you were defeated by a dog." "Not a dog," Ramirez corrected, pulling up thermal footage of Shadow in action. "A Delta Force K9 operator. And now we know why he was assigned here." Petrov studied the footage, his cold eyes narrowing. "Echo 7. I remember this one from Afghanistan. My unit encountered him in Kandahar province. We lost 6 men, never fired a shot that connected." He turned to his own tactical team. "Release the hunters." From the last helicopter, 4 men emerged with their own dogs. Belgian Malinois bred and trained by Russian military programs. These weren't normal attack dogs. They were counter K9 specialists, specifically trained to combat American military. Working dogs. In the command bunker, Shadow's ears pricked forward. Through the tactical sensors, he could smell them. The Russian dogs. His muscles tensed as combat memories surfaced. He'd fought their kind before, in valleys far from here. "Multiple K9 units detected," Collins reported, checking the thermal feeds. "Russian military breeds. They're escalating beyond anything we expected." Luna watched Shadow's reaction, seeing a new intensity in his posture. "He's fought them before." "Kandahar. Province," Collins confirmed grimly. Shadow was instrumental in stopping a Russian attempt to compromise a similar installation. That's why he was chosen for this mission. He's one of the few military dogs with experience protecting these kinds of secrets. The tactical display lit up with new warnings. The Russian dogs were moving in complex search patterns. Their handlers, using old Soviet military protocols. They weren't just searching, they were hunting, specifically for Shadow. "Your father knew this might happen," Collins explained, activating new security systems. These old command centers were prime targets. During the Cold War, that's why the military left certain defenses operational. Underground sensors began picking up vibrations. The cartel wasn't just coming over land anymore. They were trying to access the old tunnel systems that honeycombed the valley. "They really know what's here," Luna whispered, watching multiple threat indicators light up her tactical screen. "Da!" A heavily accented voice cut through their radio channel. "We know exactly what we're looking for." Petrov's voice carried decades of Cold War expertise. "That bunker contains access codes to military communications networks that were never fully decommissioned, worth billions to the right buyers." Shadow moved to the bunker's main access point, his posture communicating clear warning. He'd faced Russian operators before, had learned their tactics, their weaknesses. "You have one chance," Petrov continued. "Surrender the facility, and we ensure your survival. Resist." The threat hung in the air as the Russian dog's howls echoed across the valley. Collins checked his tactical gear, then looked at Luna. "Those tunnels under your farm? They connect to a network that runs through 3 states. If the cartel gets control of them, they'll have unlimited smuggling routes," Luna finished, "plus access to military secrets." Shadow's growl took on a new tone, not just protective but challenging. Through the thermal sensors, they could see the Russian dogs advancing, their movements showing their specialized training. This is what he was really prepared for, Collins said, watching Shadow shift into full combat mode. Not just cartel thugs. This is a real military threat, the kind he faced in combat. The tactical display showed more forces arriving, not just cartel soldiers now, but international mercenaries. Petrov was deploying assets from multiple countries, all drawn by what lay hidden beneath the Montana soil. "They're coming from all sides," Luna reported, watching the threat indicators multiply. "No," Collins corrected grimly. "They're coming from all dimensions, air, ground, underground. This is a full military-style assault." Shadow moved between defensive positions, his training fully activated. Each Russian dog presented a specific threat profile he remembered from combat. Each mercenary team showed tactical patterns he'd learned to counter. "Your father knew this day might come," Collins told Luna as they prepared for the assault. "That's why Shadow didn't just end up here by chance. He was chosen because he's faced exactly this kind of attack before, and won." The bunker's sensors picked up more tunneling attempts. The cartel's forces were trying to breach the underground facility from multiple points, using old Soviet thermal drilling equipment. "They'll be through in minutes," Luna warned. Shadow's posture shifted one final time, from combat ready to something else, something that made even Collins step back. This wasn't just a military working dog anymore. This was the ghost of Kandahar, facing the kind of threat he'd been specifically trained to counter. "Let them come," Collins said, checking his tactical gear. "They think they're about to seize some old military codes. Instead, they're about to learn why Shadow's missions in Afghanistan are still classified." The Russian dog's howls grew closer as Luna activated the bunker's final defensive systems. The cartel had just transformed a simple land grab into an international military operation. They were about to learn why some secrets are guarded by more than just fences and guns. Some secrets are guarded by ghosts who know exactly how to fight this kind of war. The command bunker's sensors painted a grim picture. Red threat indicators blinked from every direction. Surface teams, underground drilling units, and aerial support all converging on the farm. But it was the 4 Russian dogs that concerned Shadow most. Their heat signatures moved with military precision, each one following combat patterns he remembered from Afghanistan. "They're establishing a perimeter," Collins explained, watching the tactical display. "Those dogs aren't just trained to attack, they're counter-special operations units. They know how to disable military working dogs specifically." Luna checked Shadow's tactical vest one final time, making sure every piece of equipment was secure. "But they've never faced him before." "No," Collins agreed, "they haven't. And that's our advantage." He pulled up Shadow's combat record on the main screen. Every time Russian forces encountered Echo 7 in Afghanistan, they had to abort their missions. They never figured out how one dog could consistently outmaneuver their entire tactical teams. Shadow's ears suddenly pricked forward. Through the bunker's enhanced audio sensors, they could hear the Russian dogs communicating, short, sharp barks that carried tactical information. But Shadow wasn't just listening, he was analyzing, remembering, planning. "Multiple breach points detected," Luna reported, watching new warnings flash across her screen. "They're using some kind of sonic drilling equipment in the tunnels." Collins nodded grimly. "Soviet-era tech, designed specifically for penetrating hardened military installations. Your father knew they might try this, that's why." He pressed a sequence on the control panel, and previously hidden blast doors slid into place throughout the tunnel system. "The whole farm is one big defensive position," Luna realized. "Everything Dad built, every renovation, every improvement. It was all preparing for this." Shadow moved to the tactical map, his training evident in every motion. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a special operations veteran planning his final battle. His nose touched specific points on the display. Natural choke points, ambush, positions, areas where the Russian dogs' training would work against them. He's outlining a counter-assault strategy, Collins explained, recognizing the patterns. See how he's marking the terrain. He wants to split their forces, deal with the Russian K9 units individually. Luna studied the map, seeing her farm through new eyes. The grain silos weren't just storage, they were perfect elevated firing positions. The irrigation ditches could channel enemy movement. Even the old tractor, deliberately broken down in the north field, provided crucial cover. Tunnel breach in 3 minutes, the computer warned. Above them, they could hear the Russian dogs, moving into position, their handlers speaking in hushed commands. They think they have us surrounded, Collins said, checking his weapon. But Shadow's been preparing this battlefield since the day he arrived. Every patrol, every perimeter check. He was mapping defensive positions, planning for exactly this. A scenario. Shadow's posture shifted as new scents reached his enhanced senses. Cordite, gun oil, the distinct smell of Russian military equipment. But underneath it all, something else, the scent of fear. The Russian dogs might be well trained, but they were about to face something their training hadn't prepared them for. Multiple threats converging, Luna reported, watching the tactical display. Surface teams moving in from all directions. Aerial units holding at 3,000 feet. Underground breach teams at 80% penetration. Collins gave Shadow a hand signal that made the dog's entire demeanor change. This wasn't just combat readiness, this was something else, something that spoke of classified missions and battles that would never appear in any official record. You know what they're really here for, Collins told Luna as they made final preparations. Those old command codes are valuable, but the tunnel system is the real prize. A secure underground network running through 3 states. If the cartel gets control of it, they won't, Luna said firmly, checking her own tactical gear. Shadow pressed against her leg, his presence solid and reassuring. This is our home, our ground, our rules. Above them, the Russian dogs began their final approach. Through the sensors, Shadow could track their movements. Professional, coordinated, deadly. But they were following patterns he knew, tactics. He'd learned to counter in valleys far from here. 2 minutes to breach, the computer announced. Shadow moved to his starting position, every muscle coiled with combat-ready tension. He wasn't just defending a farm anymore. He was protecting secrets that could change the balance of power in the western United States. 2 minutes to breach, the computer announced. Shadow moved to his starting position, every muscle coiled with combat-ready tension. He wasn't just defending a farm anymore. He was protecting secrets that could change the balance of power in the western United States. Remember, Collins said, watching the enemy forces close in. They think they're hunting us. Let them keep thinking that right up until they realize who's really hunting who. Shadow's growl was barely audible, but it carried years of combat experience. The Russian dogs might be trained for special operations, but they were about to learn why some operators become legends. The farm was quiet now, holding its breath before the storm. But beneath that silence, ancient military systems hummed to life, preparing for one final battle. The cartel thought they had trapped a young woman, an old soldier, and a military dog in a corner. They were about to learn why some corners are best left unexplored. 1 minute to breach. The command bunker's screens showed a tactical nightmare, enemy forces converging from every possible angle. Petrov had deployed his assets in a perfect military operation. The 4 Russian dogs led their teams with cold precision, each unit moving in coordinated patterns designed to counter American special operations tactics. They're good, Collins admitted, watching the tactical display. Very good, but they've made one critical mistake. He looked at Shadow, who stood battle-ready by the main access door. They think they know what they're fighting. Luna checked the underground sensors one last time. The drilling teams had nearly reached the outer containment walls. Above ground, thermal imaging showed 20 elite operators moving into final attack positions. The Russian dogs prowled the perimeter, their military training evident in every movement. "Shadow," Collins said quietly. "Authorization Echo 7 Delta. Full tactical response." The change in the dog was immediate and startling. This wasn't just combat mode. This was something else, something that made Luna understand why even hardened Special Forces operators spoke of him with awe. Every muscle, every sense, every combat-hardened instinct focused on the coming battle. "Your father left one last surprise," Collins told Luna, activating a hidden panel. Inside was a set of tactical gear she'd never seen before, specialized equipment designed specifically for working with military K9 operators. He knew this day would come, knew you'd need to fight alongside Shadow as a true combat team. Through the bunker's enhanced audio systems, they could hear Petrov directing his forces. The Russian commander was methodical, professional, leaving nothing to chance. His dogs moved in precise search patterns, their handlers using Soviet-era combat protocols that Shadow recognized from classified operations. 30 seconds to breach, the computer warned. Luna felt the vibrations as multiple drilling teams reached their final positions. They would breach simultaneously, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm any defense. "Remember," Collins said, checking their tactical communications one last time, "they think they're about to seize valuable military assets. Let them keep thinking that right up until—" The sensors screamed with new warnings. The Russian dogs had picked up Shadow's scent, and their behavior changed instantly. These weren't normal military working dogs anymore. They were specialized hunters, bred and trained specifically to counter American K9 operators. "They remember him," Collins said grimly, watching their reaction. "From Afghanistan. They recognize his scent pattern." Luna saw it in the thermal imaging, the way the Russian dogs moved now with focused intensity, their handlers switching to specialized tactical protocols. "They're scared of him." "They should be," Collins replied. "In 4 years of combat operations, Shadow never lost an engagement with Russian K9 units. Never. That's why they assigned him here. Not just because of his combat record, but because he's faced exactly this kind of threat before." Shadow's ears tracked multiple targets, his enhanced senses building a complete tactical picture. The Russian dogs were good. Their movements showed years of specialized training. But they were following patterns, protocols, standard operating procedures. Shadow had learned to transcend training, to adapt in ways that made him legendary even among special operations units. 10 seconds to breach, the computer announced. Through the reinforced walls, they could hear the drilling reaching its final stage. The Russian dogs began their attack barks, short, sharp signals that carried combat instructions to their handlers. Luna moved to her position, the specialized tactical gear feeling surprisingly natural. Shadow pressed against her leg one last time, not seeking comfort, but establishing the physical connection that would make them a single fighting unit. "They think they're about to capture a strategic military asset," Collins said, watching the enemy forces reach their final positions. "Show them why some assets fight back." The first explosion rocked the bunker as multiple breach points detonated simultaneously. Through the chaos, Shadow remained perfectly still, every muscle coiled with lethal purpose. He wasn't just defending territory anymore. He was about to remind these Russian dogs why American Special Operations K9s were considered the deadliest in the world. "Remember," Collins said as the blast doors began to fail, "we're not just protecting secrets. We're defending something bigger. This farm, these tunnels, they're part of America's last line of defense. If they fall..." Luna checked her tactical display one final time. Enemy forces had reached optimal attack positions. The Russian dogs were coordinating their final approach. Petrov's elite operators prepared to breach from multiple angles. Shadow's growl changed pitch, not threatening but promising. Through the tactical sensors, they could see the Russian dogs hesitate, remembering encounters in distant valleys. They were about to learn why some legends are born in combat, not kennels. The final breach alarm sounded. Luna looked at Shadow, seeing not just her protector but a special operations veteran about to go to war one last time. "Ready, boy?" Shadow's response was a single bark, cold, professional, carrying 4 years of combat experience. The cartel thought they were about to seize valuable military assets. Instead, they were about to learn why some military assets... Bite back. The blast doors failed. The battle for the Martinez farm was about to begin. The first Russian dog breached the outer defense line exactly as Shadow predicted. 4 years of combat experience had taught him how Soviet-trained K9 units operated, always leading with their strongest asset, always following established protocols. The Belgian Malinois moved with lethal precision, its specialized training evident in every step. But Shadow wasn't there. The Russian dog found only empty space where its tactical training said a defending K9 should be. In that moment of confusion, Shadow struck from an impossible angle. He'd learned in Afghanistan that the key to defeating Russian dogs wasn't matching their training, but transcending it. "Contact front," a handler shouted in Russian, but Shadow was already gone, melting into the shadows that had earned him his combat name. The Russian dog spun, trying to track him, but 4 years of special operations had taught Shadow how to become invisible, even to enhanced canine senses. Luna watched through her tactical display as Shadow systematically dismantled the Russian dog team's coordination. A ghost in the darkness, he struck at their weakest points, not attacking directly, but using their own training against them. Each Russian dog was expertly trained to respond to specific threats. Shadow gave them none of the patterns they expected. "He's not fighting them," Collins observed, monitoring the tactical feed. "He's psychologically destroying them." The second Russian dog entered through the tunnel breach, moving to support its packmate, but Shadow had anticipated this too. 4 years of combat operations had taught him that Russian K9 units always operated in supported pairs. He triggered a prepared defense, not to harm, but to separate. The tunnel section between the dogs collapsed, cutting off their ability to coordinate. "Multiple targets entering North Sector," Luna reported, watching more thermal signatures breach the perimeter. Petrov's elite operators moved with professional precision, but Shadow was already countering their advance. The third Russian dog picked up Shadow's scent and froze. Through the tactical sensors, they could see the recognition in its posture. This wasn't just any military working dog. This was the ghost of Kandahar, the K9 operator that had become a legend in special operations circles. Shadow moved like liquid shadow through his prepared defensive positions. Each Russian dog was a lethal weapon, trained specifically to counter American military working dogs, but they were trained to fight dogs that followed rules, protocols, established tactics. Shadow had learned to transcend training. "They're losing cohesion," Collins noted as the Russian dog's coordinated attack pattern began to break down. Shadow wasn't just outmaneuvering them. He was making them doubt their training, their protocols, everything they'd been taught about tactical engagement. The fourth Russian dog, the pack leader, entered the fight with cold, professional aggression. But Shadow had been waiting for this. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that Soviet-trained K9 units always held back their strongest asset until the enemy was fully engaged. What followed was a masterclass in special operations K9 warfare. Shadow didn't just fight, he controlled the battlefield, using years of combat experience to turn the farm's familiar terrain into a tactical nightmare for the Russian dogs. Each prepared position, each pre-planned route had been designed for exactly this kind of engagement. "Look at the thermal imaging," Luna said in awe. "He's not just fighting them, he's teaching them why he became a legend." On the tactical display, they watched Shadow systematically dismantle the Russian dog's coordination. One by one, their training protocols failed against an opponent who had learned to think beyond military doctrine. Each engagement lasted only seconds, but those seconds showed why Shadow had never lost a fight against Russian K9 units. "Target suppressed," Collins reported as the first Russian dog retreated, its confidence shattered by encounters with an enemy it couldn't predict. 3 remaining. Shadow moved through the darkness like the ghost he was named for, striking without warning, disappearing before the Russian dogs could respond. Their specialized training had prepared them for conventional threats. Shadow had spent 4 years learning to be anything but conventional. Luna watched her protector become something more than just a military working dog. This was the ghost of Kandahar in his element, showing why some operators become legends not through victory, but through the way they change how battles are fought. The night erupted with combat as Petrov's elite operators tried to support their K9 units, but Shadow had prepared for this too. Each Russian dog found itself isolated, separated from support, forced to face an opponent who had turned tactical warfare into an art form. "Echo 7, Collins transmitted, using Shadow's official call sign. "You are clear for full tactical response." Shadow's acknowledgement was silent but clear. The time for testing had ended. Now he would show these Russian dogs why some legends are born in combat, not kennels. The night sky erupted with the sound of military helicopters as Shadow engaged the second Russian dog. 3 Blackhawks appeared over the ridge, their specialized K9 tactical teams fast roping into prepared landing zones. But Shadow didn't need their help, not yet. He was in his element, showing why he'd earned his reputation in the deadliest valleys of Afghanistan. "Delta Force K9 teams on ground," Collins reported, watching the tactical display. "But look, Shadow's already changed." The battle, he was right. The remaining Russian dogs had lost their tactical cohesion, their carefully planned assault falling apart against an opponent who moved like a ghost through their formations. Shadow wasn't just fighting them, he was systematically destroying their confidence, their training, their belief in their own superiority. "Target their command and control," Luna ordered, using the tactical command she'd learned. Shadow acknowledged with silent efficiency, already moving to isolate Petrov's command element from their K9 units. The Russian commander watched in growing frustration as his elite dogs, each worth millions in specialized training, began to falter. "Impossible," he muttered, watching Shadow's heat signature move with impossible precision through their defensive positions. "No American dog can fight like this." But Shadow was proving him wrong with every engagement. The second Russian dog went down to a perfectly executed tactical disable, not injured, but thoroughly defeated by an opponent it couldn't track, couldn't predict, couldn't fight. "Multiple breach teams entering the tunnel system," Luna reported, but her voice held no fear now. Shadow had prepared for this, had spent months memorizing every corner, every junction, every possible attack route. The Delta Force teams moved to secure the perimeter, but they found most of their work already done. Shadow had turned the entire farm into a tactical nightmare for the attacking forces, using his intimate knowledge of the terrain to separate and neutralize threats before they could coordinate. "Echo 7, this is Tactical Command," a new voice crackled over their secure channel. "Your mission profile is confirmed. You are authorized for full spectrum response." Shadow's acknowledgement was professional, efficient. The third Russian dog found itself facing not just a military working dog, but a special operations legend who had spent years perfecting the art of tactical warfare. The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds, ending with another perfectly executed disable. "Look at their thermal signatures," Collins said, watching the remaining Russian dog's heat pattern change. "They're not just losing. They're learning why Shadow became a legend in Spec Ops." Luna watched through her tactical display as Shadow moved like liquid shadow through the battlefield he'd prepared. Each movement was calculated, each position pre-planned, each engagement designed to maximize psychological impact while minimizing actual violence. "The tunnel!" Petrov's voice crackled over their intercepted communications. "He's driving us into the tunnel system." But it was too late. Shadow had deliberately maneuvered the remaining Russian dog and its handlers into the underground network he knew intimately. Down there, in the darkness, he'd made his ally. The ghost of Kandahar would show why some reputations are earned in blood and shadow. The Delta Force teams secured their positions, their own military dogs watching with professional respect as Shadow systematically dismantled what had been considered the elite of Russian K9 warfare. This wasn't just combat. This was art, performed by a master who had spent 4 years learning how to transcend normal military doctrine. "Target suppressed," Luna reported as the last Russian dog retreated, its specialized training shattered by encounters with something beyond its experience. Shadow has control of the tunnel system. Collins watched the tactical display with quiet pride. Now they understand. Now they know why we chose him for this mission, why some dogs become more than just military assets. The night belonged to Shadow now, and in the darkness he'd made his domain. He would show these elite forces why. Some legends are born in combat, not training. In the deepest part of the tunnel system, where old military corridors met modern cartel ambition, Petrov made his final stand. The Russian commander had lost his elite K9 units. His tactical teams were in disarray, but he still had one card to play. In his hand, he held the detonator that could bring the entire underground network down. "One more step," he warned as Shadow materialized from the darkness. "And I collapse it all. Everything your handler died protecting, gone in an instant." But Shadow had fought smarter enemies in darker places. His enhanced senses detected what Petrov couldn't know. The Delta Force teams had already disabled the main explosive charges. The Russian's detonator was connected to nothing but his own hubris. "You don't understand what you're really fighting, do you?" Luna's voice came through the tactical speakers. She and Collins had synchronized with Shadow's movements, using the old military communications network to coordinate their final assault. "He's not just a military dog. He's the reason they closed the K9 Special Operations Program." Shadow moved like liquid darkness, each step calculated from 4 years of combat experience. He wasn't just fighting Petrov, he was dismantling him, psychologically, using every trick learned in 100 classified missions. "Impossible," Petrov whispered, watching Shadow's approach with growing terror. "The stories from Afghanistan, they were just propaganda." But Shadow was proving those stories true with every movement. He had driven Petrov exactly where he wanted him, using the Russians' own tactical doctrine against him. In the confined space of the tunnel, all of Petrov's remaining advantages meant nothing. "Echo 7, you are clear to engage," Collins transmitted. "Show him why they called you the Ghost." What followed wasn't just combat, it was art. Shadow executed a series of movements so precise, so perfectly calculated, that Petrov never had a chance to use his backup weapon. In less than 3 seconds, the Russian commander found himself disarmed and disabled by a creature that moved more like a shadow than a dog. "Target secured," Luna reported, watching through Shadow's tactical camera. "Tunnel system is clear." Above ground, the Delta Force teams had rounded up the remaining cartel forces, but they found them already demoralized, shaken by encounters, with something their combat experience hadn't prepared them for. "You see now," Collins asked Petrov as they secured him, "why Shadow was chosen for this mission. Some dogs are trained for war. He learned to transcend it. The night belonged to Shadow, but victory had come at a price. The farm would need rebuilding. The tunnel system would require new security. and the world would never know the full story of how one Special Operations K9 had protected secrets worth dying for. Luna knelt beside her protector, seeing now the full measure of what her father had entrusted to her. "Good boy," she whispered, but the words meant something different now. This wasn't praise for a pet, it was recognition between warriors. Shadow stood vigilant, his posture still combat-ready despite the battle's end. He wasn't just a military asset or a farm protector anymore. He was a legend made real, a ghost who had shown why some battles are won not through force, but through the artistry of perfect tactical execution. The cartel would remember this night. They would tell stories about the farm that couldn't be taken, the dog that fought like a ghost, and the secrets that some guardians would die protecting, but they would never know the full truth. That on this night, in these tunnels, they had faced something beyond their understanding. They had faced the ghost of Kandahar and learned why some legends are born in shadow, not light. Dawn broke over the Martinez farm, revealing the scope of the night's battle. Military helicopters dotted the landscape, their crews securing the perimeter while Delta Force teams cleared the tunnel system. The Russian dogs, now subdued and contained, watched with newfound respect as Shadow made his final security sweep. 23 cartel operators captured, Collins reported, checking the tactical numbers. 4 Russian military K9s neutralized without serious injury, and a classified underground facility successfully defended. He looked at Shadow with pride. Not bad for one night's work. Luna surveyed her farm, noting the damage but also seeing it differently now. Every feature she'd thought was just part of the landscape had served a tactical purpose. The irrigation ditches that had channeled enemy movement, the grain silos that had provided perfect sniper positions, the old tractor that had concealed military-grade surveillance equipment. "The farm will need repairs," she said, watching cleanup. "Teams begin their work." "But they'll never try this again, will they?" Collins shook his head. "The cartel just learned a very expensive lesson about which targets to avoid. And those Russian dogs?" He gestured to where the elite K9 units were being transported. "They'll go home with stories about why American special operations became legendary." Shadow stood at Luna's side, his posture still professional but relaxed now. The ghost of Kandahar had completed his mission. Now he could return to being what he'd chosen to be, a guardian of home and peace, always ready but no longer needing to prove his combat prowess. The morning sun revealed a farm changed not just physically, but fundamentally. What had been hidden was now secured. What had been threatened was now protected, and what had been a simple farm dog had shown himself to be something far more extraordinary. "Your father would be proud," Collins said quietly, "of both of you." A month after the battle, the Martinez farm showed few signs of the conflict that had transformed it. The fields were healing, the buildings repaired, and the subtle security upgrades were once again hidden beneath a veneer of agricultural simplicity. But things had changed in ways that went beyond the physical. Shadow still made his daily patrols, but now Luna understood what he was really doing. Each perimeter check was a tactical assessment. Each seemingly casual observation point was a security position. The farm hadn't just survived, it had evolved into something stronger. "The underground facility is fully secured," Collins reported during his weekly check-in. "And word has spread through the right channels. No one will mistake this place for an easy target again." Luna watched Shadow playing with the local children who'd come to visit the farm. To them, he was just a friendly German shepherd. But when unknown vehicles approached, or unfamiliar scents caught his attention, the ghost of Kandahar was still there, ready to protect what he'd chosen as his home. "He's happier now," Luna observed, "like he can finally be both things, the guardian and the farm dog." The farm had become a strange blend of military precision and rural peace. The Russian dog's defeat had become something of a legend in special operations circles, whispered about in training camps and tactical briefings. But here, in the Montana sunshine, Shadow was content to simply be a protector of gentler things. Some warriors, Collins said, watching Shadow guide the children away from a patch of repaired fencing, find their greatest victories in peace, not war. The sunset painted Montana's sky in shades of amber and gold as Luna and Shadow made their final evening patrol. The farm had flourished in the months since the battle, its secrets now secure, its defenders respected. Shadow moved with the same fluid grace that had made him a legend in Afghanistan, but there was peace in his vigilance now. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Luna asked, watching him pause at his favorite observation point. "What this place really was, what you were really protecting." Shadow pressed against her leg, his posture conveying what words couldn't. He wasn't just a military asset who had found a retirement post. He was a warrior who had chosen his final mission, protecting not just classified secrets or strategic assets, but a home and the person who had given him one. As darkness settled over the valley, Shadow's ears pricked forward, scanning for threats that no longer came. The ghost of Kandahar remained vigilant, but now his greatest victory was in keeping peace rather than winning wars. Some guardians are born in battle, but the greatest find their true purpose in protecting the peace they fought to secure.